Okay. Okay, we are live. Okay, we're gonna just take a look at all the different states and see how it's going. Alright, so first I need to explain a little bit about the chart here. Um, Pardon my voice. So we get all of our data from Worldometers. I don't know if you're familiar with this website, Worldometers. They're checking all the different countries, and you can look here and see all the information on different countries and the different statistics on those countries. And if you look here, you have known yesterday, and they have deaths, cases, and all these categories, active cases, total recovered. So you have all this information. So I draw data from Worldometers and draw it into my spreadsheet and sort of rearrange it and remix it. Um, we do this specifically to track a number of different things. Um, Things that we track that nobody else is doing is the increase in active cases, what the case fatality rate is. Actually, that should be 1.6 because that was the case fatality rate for the date that we just did. Change that. I publish this every day to my Facebook feed and to those who are interested in looking. Um, Basically, we track those things, and we have a growth trend column here that nobody else is tracking, and we have expected deaths with the case fatality rate, total deaths, new deaths, all these things are from Worldometer, but I also take in the total number of tests for the day and compare that to the previous day and show how many tests were done for each state. So we'll just go down the states here real quick. We have Alabama with 1,958 new cases. Their 7-day average new case is 1,376, so we saw decent size growth in Alabama. We expected 9 deaths. We saw 3. Now Tuesdays is one of the lower reporting days. And we saw an increase of active cases by 1955, which means that 3 cases they've had resolved, 8,000 tests. Now, who knows how long those tests are taking? Most of the tests are taking 7 days to get a result back. By that time, person could be dead or have infected many people. So we've been looking here in Alaska. Alaska has seen a surge in cases over the last couple weeks. They're now up to 60 cases today. That's a growth of 23% over their 7-day average. No deaths yet because their cases are all relatively new. We'll start seeing deaths probably in about a week or so. That's kind of how it goes. It takes about 18 days for somebody to die from coronavirus. Arizona has been a hotspot. You can see here, 3,483 is the 7-day average cases. We saw not so many cases reported today, 1,357, but we also only saw 8 deaths when we expected 35. So we expect that underreporting. We're still usually takes until Wednesday to catch up on case reporting from hospitals. Arkansas, a slight decrease in cases. That's good to see. 650 is the average, so Arkansas saw 572, which is a reduction in number of cases. That's what you want to see. Low in the deaths as well. So in California, we're still seeing a surge in California, averaging 7,956. We saw 8,350 there, an increase of 5% over the average, not a huge increase. We expected 58 deaths and we saw 45. So California, we have to keep an eye on that. Colorado, doing pretty good. Keeping the cases down. They're surrounded by states that are not having such good outcomes, but I think Colorado has the pandemic under control. We expected only 3 deaths there today, and we saw just 2. In Connecticut, unfortunately, we saw a rise in cases in Connecticut. Connecticut's had a tough run with over 4,000 total deaths. And we saw 23 new deaths in Connecticut. So there's something going on there We'd love to know a little bit more about what's going on there, being that's right next door to where I live. Delaware is doing pretty good. 75 new cases, 97 is expected. That's a 7-day average. Um, District of Columbia, 13% growth, just 6 cases. Pretty under control in DC. Federal prisons continues to be a sore spot. Um, we're seeing 193 new cases in the federal prison system. Averages 158. Georgia. Georgia's been a bit of a hotspot lately. 3,059 is a 7-day average. Let's get that lined up to where we want. Okay. We saw 3,643 cases in Georgia. That's always, questionable with the government in Georgia really controlling how things are going there. Kemp definitely let the state open up too early. We expected 16 deaths there and saw 25. Hawaii has seen a rise in cases recently over the last week and a half or so. They're up to an average of 28 cases. Today, they're down a little bit, but we have to keep an eye on that. Idaho has seen some growth, 10% increase in cases, with a couple of deaths expected. We didn't see any deaths observed. Illinois, 954 cases, 883 new cases, below the 7-day average. That's good. Indiana is below the 7-day average. Iowa is below the 7-day average. Kansas, we're seeing a breakout in Kansas. They're averaging 421 with a 257% growth there. They still have a pretty low caseload. We only expected 2 deaths. They saw 1. Kansas, we're definitely going to have to watch. Kentucky has been going with a lot of cases recently. They're down a little bit today with a reasonable 264. Louisiana is next with 1,705 cases. They've been seeing a lot of cases recently. They're down today, but tomorrow we should expect to see them break the average again. Maine is pretty under control. Maryland, pretty under control. Massachusetts, definitely under control, right on the average. Michigan, under control. Minnesota, under control, but they can break out of that and go above average pretty often. Mississippi, under control. They had a breakout about a week ago, and they've gotten it under control. Now, this is interesting. Missouri, which is where you saw that party that was on the news a few weeks ago, several weeks ago, where I think it was Lake of the Ozarks. So they are seeing some good growth numbers now. 970 cases, highest they've ever been. So we have to keep an eye on that average of 662. 16 deaths today. We only expected 4, so they're obviously having a problem. Nebraska. Uh, oh, actually, Montana is next. 9% growth. They had 3 deaths, and we only expected 0, actually. So they're sort of ahead of the curve. Nebraska has some growth going on. Nevada has a little growth going on as they open up all the casinos there. We'll expect that to get a lot more out of control as the casinos open up. New Hampshire has been sort of a oasis in the middle of the country. It's actually in the corner of the country. They have been very under control. 14 cases there. And going down the list here, New Jersey, seeing some new cases. They had a hard time early on in the pandemic. Um, 30 deaths listed, but we only expected 5. These are probably a backlog. Same thing with New Mexico, probably a backlog. Oh, I'm sorry, same thing with New York. These are probably a backlog. New Mexico, we expected those three deaths. North Carolina, hmm, this has been rising slowly and steadily. North Carolina has some issues. We expected 19 deaths. We saw 18 today. North Dakota is also rising in cases, breaking 108 new cases. That's close to a record for them, I think. Ohio, close to a record. And then Oklahoma, right under the average, and Oregon, right under the average. Pennsylvania, right under the average. Puerto Rico seeing a little bit of a spike here. Rhode Island is seeing a spike. South Carolina. South Carolina has been a bit of a hot spot. They're under average today, but I expect later in the week they'll be above. And South Dakota doing pretty good. Tennessee has been a hot spot. You see they've grown by 120% here. 1504, definitely up there. Texas has been going gangbusters. They're under average, but only just under average. We'll expect that to go above average again tomorrow. U.S. military always sees a lot of cases. They're in cramped conditions usually, so we're getting a lot of cases. The good thing about the U.S. military is you see their case fatality ratio is only 0.16%. So a lot of young, healthy people in the military, they don't die. That is good news. Utah, under average. and Vermont always very low. They've got it under control up there. Veterans Affairs. Um, this is one of the tragedies that our veterans are not being protected from coronavirus. We've seen an 8% growth in cases there, 10 deaths, a total of 1,792 deaths. And we have a very high case fatality ratio for our veterans. Virginia, growth once again. Washington State, we're seeing some cases in Washington State. It's kind of like the original epicenter of the virus. Now they're seeing sort of a new spike in cases. So something to be concerned about. And West Virginia under control. Wisconsin sort of on average. Wyoming is just beginning to spike. We've been seeing cases come into Wyoming on a more frequent basis. A total of 465 deaths today, and we expected 466 on a Tuesday with a 1.6% case fatality ratio. Tuesdays are always lower than Wednesday. Wednesday will spike up by another percent point usually, but we'll see. We'll see that tomorrow. We have a growth in the increase in active cases. So typically states have active cases that stay on the books for a long time. 1.8 million, almost 1.8 million active cases in the United States out of a total of 3.4. So only a little more than half of the people that have had coronavirus have cleared it officially. We saw 65,000 new cases today. That's a lot. Not a record, but it's up there. It's like, I think, number 2 or 3. I could look back on my spreadsheet. Pardon me if I slur my words a little. I have MS, and it's difficult to do all this talking for me. This is a calculation that I do if we have a case fatality rate of 3% and we have this many new cases by November 2nd, I'm projecting 273,000 people to die by the time the election comes around. We have 15,822 in the ICU, and we have a total of 783,000 people that were testing positive for coronavirus. Oh no, that's not testing positive. That's tests were performed. So even though those tests were performed, we don't know the answer to those tests. There is a 7-day lag time. I also do this. I project the number of deaths based on the case fatality ratio for the amount of new cases that come in today. So that's pretty much it. Oh, I look at this also, week over week growth. Um, so last week, the same day on Tuesday, today we have an 11,010 case growth, which is an 18% growth. That's pretty high. Um, so that will make it difficult in the upcoming days because we should see a lot more people contracting the virus as these case numbers come up. So that pretty much does it. Being I don't have anybody sitting on, uh, sitting here asking questions at the time, I can't explain any more than I know. Um, so I'll try to do this every night around the same time, 11 p.m. So tune in tomorrow night and maybe you can ask some questions if you have some questions. So that'll be it, and I will stop the stream right now and tune in tomorrow.